Not that I needed to remind you, but Democrats have abandoned civil liberties. What's interesting about this story and what we're about to read is that it comes from Matt Taibbi. Matt Taibbi is just a journalist. In fact, he's rather a lefty one. He's not particularly pro-Trump, but he's consistently come out, much like Glenn Greenwald and many other actual progressives, challenging the federal government, the FBI, the intelligence agencies. And this offers up a very strange defense of Michael Flynn, but he's right. We have seen right now the ACLU abandon civil liberties. The left, the Democrats, they don't care anymore. Dare I say, they've become overtly evil, violating the civil rights of many individuals. That I cannot support. But to see a journalist like Matt Taibbi, of Rolling Stone no less, come out and say this, I find fascinating, which is why we're going to read what he has to say. He says the Blue Party's Trump-era embrace of authoritarianism isn't just wrong, it's a fatal political mistake. Emmett G. Sullivan, the judge in the case of former Trump National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, is refusing to let William Barr's Justice Department drop the charge. He's even thinking of adding more, appointing a retired judge to ask whether the court should issue an order to show cause why Mr. Flynn should not be held in criminal contempt for perjury. Pundits are cheering. A trio of former law enforcement and judicial officials saluted Sullivan in the Washington Post, chirping, "The Flynn case isn't over until a judge says it's over." Yuppie icon Jeffrey Toobin of CNN and The New Yorker, one of the resistance crowd's favorite legal authorities, described Sullivan's appointment of Judge John Gleeson as brilliant. MSNBC legal analyst Glenn Kirchner said Americans owe Sullivan a debt of gratitude. One had to search far and wide to find a non-conservative legal analyst willing to say the obvious, i.e., that Sullivan's decision was the kind of thing one would expect from a judge in Belarus. Well done, Matt. George Washington University professor Jonathan Turley was one of the few willing to say Sullivan's move could create a threat of a judicial charge, even when prosecutors agree with defendants. Sullivan's reaction was amplified by a group letter calling for Barr's resignation, signed by 2,000 former Justice Department officials. The melodramatic group email, somberly reported as momentous news, is one of many tired media tropes in the Trump era. And the preposterous leak of news that the dropped case made Barack Obama sad. The former president privately told members of his administration, who instantly told Yahoo News that there was no precedent for dropping of perjury charges and that the rule of law itself was at stake. Whatever one's opinion of Flynn, his relations with Turkey, his locker-up chance, his haircut, or anything, the case was never about much. There's no longer pretense that prosecution would lead to the unspooling of a massive Trump-Russia conspiracy, as pundits once breathlessly expected. In fact, news that Flynn was cooperating with special counsel Robert Mueller inspired many of the "is this the beginning of the end" for Trump stories that will someday fill whole chapters of journalism F-Ups 101 textbooks. Bravo, good sir. I want to throw flowers. Matt Taibbi, excellent writing. That's the joke I made about Joe Biden. Is this the beginning of the end for Joe Biden as a bombshell report shows the walls are closing in? How many times did we hear that with all of the Russiagate psychosis? The walls are closing in. The beginning of the end. The beginning of the end. It's a bombshell report, they would say. But nothing. And it was because of these fake investigations. And it took us years to find out the investigations were fake. How could it be that after we learned that there was no investigative basis for Michael Flynn's, for the FBI to go after Michael Flynn, that it wasn't perjury, that it was one kind of lying to the FBI in an informal meeting he didn't even know was, that relevant? How could it be that they still want this to be pursued? You know why? This is the danger of authoritarianism. The Democrats right now, the ones cheering for this, they are the people who want to lock you in a gulag. They're the people who want to take away your free speech. They're the people who want to take away your due process rights. They want to try you in a court of public opinion like Brett Kavanaugh. But when finally it is now levied against them, the same rules they put in place, they say, we don't care. We'll vote for Joe Biden anyway. These people must not be given power. Oh, and don't forget, it was the Republicans who just voted in favor of FISA spying. And it was the Democrats who actually opposed the spying provision for browser history. So, yeah, don't get me wrong. You got everybody to throw shade at. Unfortunately, right now, as it comes to the Republicans, there is still a large sect, the dominant one, that wants the actual rule of law and civil rights. You see, some of these Republicans, I'm not a big fan of. I mean, there's been a lot of shade thrown at Trey Gowdy for not using his power. Lindsey Graham seems to be a do-nothing Biden friend. I don't even know why he's still in office. But there's a lot of Republicans who actually do believe in freedom. One of my favorite politicians, Rand Paul, good dude. Probably disagree with him on a lot of cultural issues. But when it comes to liberty and the powers of the government, hey, man, I'm right there. I respect and agree with him. I'd vote for that guy in 2 seconds. And it's funny because people drag him all the time. I'm like, look, man, when someone says we should give the federal government the rights to violate civil liberties, I just say no. And who can you always count on to say no? Rand Paul. Appreciate that guy. The Democrats you can always count on. Well, actually, it's not fair. They did vote to get rid of this one browsing history provision. The problem I see, though, right now, whatever's happening with this flip in the culture war, we're seeing conservatives start to embrace much more libertarian, liberty-minded principles. I don't want to say libertarian overtly, but for the most part, culturally, they're saying we don't like this stuff. We don't like the executive authority. We don't like the abuse from these governors. The Democrats are cheering for it. The cultural left has called for censorship. The cultural left has said, but I'm a private company. There are reports that Antifa was apparently going to counter-protest anti-lockdown protesters, basically supporting the government. Now, I didn't see that, so I don't know if it's true, but I wouldn't be surprised. These people are nuts. The Democrats are cheering for the FBI's false investigation and false charges against a guy. They threatened his kid and told him to plead guilty. Now, the judge, I'm assuming, is upset because Flynn, by pleading guilty, was lying. Now that he admits that they forced him to do it, that's perjury, right? That's absurd. This needs to be dropped, right? Matt Taibbi goes on to say the acts at issue are calls Flynn made to Russian. We know all this stuff. I'm not going to read over it. They say a Laurel and Hardy team of agents conducted the interview, then took 3 weeks to write and rewrite multiple versions of the interview notes, used as evidence. Because why record it? They were supervised by a counterintelligence chief who then memorialized on paper his uncertainty over whether the FBI was trying to get him to lie or get him fired. Worrying that they'd be accused of playing games. After another leak to the Washington Post in early February 2017, Flynn was actually fired and later pleaded guilty to lying about sanctions in the Kislyak call, the transcript of which was, of course, never released to either the defense or the public. Warrantless surveillance, multiple illegal leaks of classified information, a false statements charge constructed on the razor's edge of Miranda, and the use of never produced secret counterintelligence evidence in a domestic criminal proceeding. This is the rule of law we're being asked to cheer. Bravo, Matt Taibbi. Russiagate cases were often two-level offenses, factually bogus or exaggerated, but also indicative of authoritarian practices. Democrats and Democrat-friendly media pundits in the last 4 years have been consistently unable to register objections on either front. Flynn's case fits a pattern. We were told his plea was just the tip of the iceberg. That would take the trail of Russian collusion to the center of the plot, i.e. Trump. It turned out he had no deeper story to tell. In fact, none of the people prosecutors tossed into jail to get at the Russian plot, some little more than bystanders, had anything to share. Remember George Papadopoulos? I'm not going to read the entirety of his article, but I will just, point out the final conclusion here. He says, my family's in quarantine. I worry about a premature return to work. And sure, I laughed at the Shaun of the Dead photo of Ohio protesters protesting state lockdown laws. But I also recognize the crisis is also raising serious civil liberty issues, from prisoners trapped in deadly conditions to profound questions about speech and assembly, the limits to surveillance and snitching. If this disease is going to be in our lives for the foreseeable future, that makes it more urgent that we talk about what these rules will be, not less. Yet the party I grew up supporting seems to have lost the ability to do so, and I don't understand why. Well, I don't either, but I can't speculate, Matt. Power. That's what it is. Something happened culturally, and the people that used to be on our side when we were, passive liberal Democrat types, they've left because they were attacked and berated. Many of them said trade mattered. They voted for Trump. Then the lies started popping up about people I knew, my friends, who had changed their opinions. And I said, I know many of these people who voted for Trump. They're not all bigots and racists. So then they attacked me. They told me to F off. They told me if I didn't bend the knee, I must be secretly far right. And I said, you people are crazy. And now you can even see people who actually support the left admitting. In politics, everything flows in one direction. And there's a couple things this means. One, the smears, the lies, the censorship, always hits conservatives. But politics flows in one direction to another way. If I come out and say, here's a easy way to explain it. If I stand next to a Trump supporter, smiling, thumbs up, they'll say, see, it proves Tim Pool is far right. If I stand next to Antifa, they'll say, why is Antifa hanging out with someone who's far right? They'll actually argue the Antifa guy must be far right. They've done it. That shows you it only flows in one direction. There is no way to be left other than bending the knee and saying, yes, please, sir, thank you, and letting them do this insanity. Well, I, for one, won't stand by it. The Democrats have lost the plot. The Republicans aren't perfect. I've never been a big fan. But at least there is some semblance of liberty on the right now. And maybe it's because many people walked away and they went to the Republican Party. But at the very least, you have Bill Barr defending the Constitution. Absolutely not perfect. I do not like this FISA spying, and I do not like the Republicans who voted for it. But that doesn't mean I'm going to vote for them. But it does mean I'm going to criticize the Democrats because they've lost it completely. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up in just a few minutes, and I will see you all shortly.